And just yesterday, David Sachs, the head honcho over at the White House on crypto, just had Trump sign an executive order to add Bitcoin to a national strategic reserve.
Today we're signing, this is very historic, an executive order establishing a strategic Bitcoin reserve and digital asset stockpile. This is a promise that you made throughout the campaign, and today we're keeping that promise. The reserve will be capitalized with Bitcoin that the federal government already owns, so it won't cost taxpayers a dime. This is like a digital Fort Knox for digital gold. And premature sales of Bitcoin over the past years cost American taxpayers over $17 billion in lost value, because we didn't have a long-term strategy.
Right.
Now we do. So.
And this is something you believe in fully?
100%, yeah.
Okay.
And the whole community believes in it.
Very good. And they made the promise, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's a good one.
So although this was great and definitely moves the space forward, it still had many people up on X in arms because of how they were going to go about it. And with all of the uncertainty surrounding Trump and his current economic plan, markets have been in panic mode. Even the entire stock market had its worst day of the year so far. Now, all of this volatility has many people asking the question, is this the end of the bull run? Or is it the end to the bleeding before crypto markets really turn up? I'll be sure to cover all of this and the recent price action on XRP, so if you're feeling blessed and bullish, comment 777, and if you're going to be the wealthiest person in your family tree, smash the subscribe button. Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Paul, and you can find me on Twitter or X at PauliDeFi, PauliDeFi. Now here we have David Sachs, the crypto czar over at the White House, and we recently saw him talking to Trump in the beginning of this video. However, he did make a note of the fact that most of the invite lists circling X are actually fake, the stuff that you and I have probably been seeing. However, he said this one is pretty accurate, and that would include the very first person on the list, Brad Garlinghouse, the Ripple CEO. They also have people from crypto.com, Gemini, Robinhood, Kraken, Coinbase, Chainlink, World Liberty Fi, Exodus, Paradigm, and Bitcoin Magazine. So there's plenty of really key players that will be in this room that are essentially in the know of everything that's going on in crypto and will likely help David Sachs make the right decisions when it comes to their round table. However, he also mentioned the fact that he wants to keep it small for a meaningful conversation. If there are too many people and too many voices, maybe it muddies the waters and they don't get enough done. What I love about Brad Garlinghouse being there, though, is the fact that these guys are one of the major players when it comes to a stablecoin. And right now, we're not seeing any other stablecoin players there, which leads me to believe that they will create some stablecoin clarity. And by the way, with this clarity, I think USDC will slowly begin to overtake USDT, while it's potential that the RLUSD stablecoin comes in for number 2. And so this personally is the first time that I've seen a headline, in something surrounding Brad Garlinghouse with Ripple over on the Wall Street Journal. And in this, they said the president sent crypto markets into a frenzy when he said the reserve should include several smaller digital tokens, including XRP. So this is something that the president did tweet, and that's what sent markets rallying really strongly on March 2nd of this year. Since that point in time, markets have essentially clawed back all of those gains. And yes, although we were rallying to the upside just slightly, today we are currently down with the rest of the market. Now, this was news to everyone outside of Trump's direct inner circle, like his actual family, because not only did even Charles Hoskinson not know, I'm assuming that Brad Garlinghouse didn't know that he was actually going to make this tweet. However, President Trump did say it, and that sent markets flying. Now, Brad Garlinghouse in an interview said he argued that it didn't make sense for the government to hold Bitcoin alone, considering this is a crypto strategic reserve. Now, this article goes on to either praise or criticize him depending on who you ask, but generally speaking, this is what he said at the very end. I don't get it. Why is Bitcoin community so upset that other things are going to be added to the reserve? The only logical answer I can come up with is that they've had a privileged position competition, and now they're going to be on a level playing field, and they're upset about that. So what are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments below. Should they be adding XRP to a strategic reserve, or should they just keep it very straightforward and simple with digital gold and Bitcoin? Also, when you get the chance, if you haven't already, head on over to bullrunners.com. You can find the link in the description below to land over on Altcoin Pro University, which is your one-stop shop with all the right tools, training, and resources to help you reach your goals when it comes to crypto. We're talking everything you could possibly need, from education to live calls to strategies to guides and so much more. Right here you can see that we have when to buy and when to sell, portfolio tips, managing losses, yield farming guides, pair trading guides, all of the how-tos when it comes to Telegram bots, DeFi wallets, staking, psychology, how to avoid getting scammed, and even getting involved with narratives in crypto, which is really where you get ahead of the game and earn some of those insane multiples that are very difficult to see on larger market cap cryptos. So if all of that sounds interesting to you, and bar none one of the best communities of all time, then head on over to bullrunners.com. And by the way, you'll land on a page that looks like this. You can watch this video. It explains everything you get on the other side. And by the way, every single day you wait is another day that you could be missing out on some alpha that could absolutely change your life. Now let's get back into the video. Now, for one of the most important tweets, or I should say posts on X right now, comes from David Sachs, where he stated that President Trump signed an executive order to establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Now, in the yellow, I have some comments, or some details, I should say, but in this green, I have probably the most important things that we will talk about here shortly. The US government owns about 200K Bitcoin. However, there has never been a complete audit. The US will not sell any Bitcoin deposited into the reserve. So that's very good, right? Like, why would you sell gold if it's in your reserve? Why would you sell oil if it's a strategic reserve? It's only in wartime or in times of desperation that you would ever use something in a reserve. It's like a governmental savings account that you really shouldn't touch until retirement. Now, these are going to be budget neutral strategies for acquiring additional Bitcoin, providing that those strategies have no incremental costs on American taxpayers. So here's really what I want to get into right here. The reserve will be capitalized with Bitcoin owned already, by the way, by the federal government that was forfeited as a part of criminal or civil asset forfeiture procedures or proceedings. This means it will not cost taxpayers a dime. The reason this is so important, and the reason markets sold off on this news, is because everyone expected the government to print more dollars or to reallocate dollars to go and then accumulate and buy more Bitcoin. However, I do not believe that they would go and do this without first pushing it through Congress. In other words, if they wanted to take and allocate more money to something like this and create no more issues with the current level of the deficit that we have, even though technically this is an asset, they still don't want to spend a dime of taxpayer dollar. In other words, the way that they're going to do this is by creating budget neutral strategies. So maybe we can produce some energy as a nation, and with that energy, we can mine Bitcoin. And technically, if we're at a complete neutral, then they will add to the reserve. And I believe David Sachs and those guys are smart enough to do it. So this is very bullish news. The other thing that he mentioned was the fact that the U.S. digital asset stockpile will also consist of digital assets other than Bitcoin. And as we know, Trump already talked about XRP and ADA and Solana. However, this is the key point here, and this is why markets really didn't like it, including XRP holders, is the fact that they would only fund this stockpile with Bitcoin forfeited in criminal or civil proceedings, and not just Bitcoin, it would also be other digital assets. The problem is if XRP isn't stolen and we can't figure out who it goes to, then they're likely not going to be adding it at any point in the near future. It looks like this is truly only Bitcoin. It looks like they're not going to be taking a bunch of money and printing it or reallocating it into Bitcoin, but they're going to have to do those slow grow and grind. So now what we're going to do is we're going to dive into the price action. And first, I'm going to look at Bitcoin. Now, this is an hourly time frame. And the reason I'm going to look at Bitcoin is because I think it's going to give us context into what's going to happen with the rest of the markets, as Bitcoin currently is still the dominant player in markets. Now, how do we know this? Pretty straightforward. You can see Bitcoin dominance has been on the rise since November of 2022 and has not really broken down aside from one example here in December where altcoins started to rally. So whenever a lot of money flows into altcoins, typically the dominance of Bitcoin will decline. However, generally speaking, in all market environments, whether bullish or bearish, especially bearish, by the way, Bitcoin dominance continues to rise because less money is sold out of Bitcoin. There are more strong holders, there are more institutions, whereas with many altcoins, they're just another gamble and a bet. So Bitcoin dominance is currently sitting at about 61% of all of the money in the market, and that's why we do have to pay attention to Bitcoin. Now, from a daily time frame, as you can see here, Bitcoin does look like it's on a massive uptrend, right? We have a major low right here, we have our highs right here, and then we have a series of higher highs, higher lows, but generally speaking, you could even say a double bottom, double top right here with a breakout. And then generally speaking, again, major uptrend. However, it's possible that with this breakdown, we continue to break right back down into this range here to retest our previous range highs before we get some support and a bounce. That would still be a technical uptrend. However, this isn't the type of volatility that I would like to hold because it's also equally possible that we enter some sort of a recession and break down. Now, this is not me telling you that's exactly what's going to happen. I'm not a fortune teller. I don't know the future. I wish I did because then I'd be far more wealthy. But you have to play your risk properly because at the end of the day, being a good investor means you are doing proper risk management. Now, let me zoom in a little bit further. We're going to go on to Bitcoin and notice that on the news of Trump, and so you can see that markets actually did sell off on the Trump news. They experienced some volatility into the signing right here, and then it dumped pretty hard down to $84,000. Now, technically, right, you could say, well, we are currently trending up considering we're getting a series of higher lows right here with some wicks to the downside. But generally speaking, you really have to zoom out, right? When in doubt, zoom out. And as you can see here, Bitcoin is struggling to get back into a healthy range above the $93,000 to $91,000 level. And even when we pumped here on the Trump news of the strategic reserve, we actually ended up selling off right here. And this is something that we actually mentioned for our university members in a call. And the reason we did this is because it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 touches on a breakdown, right? Whatever used to be a very strong support now becomes a major resistance. So as you can see here, not only did we get a sell-off right here, but now we're getting another one right here, which leads me to believe the market's actually going to go lower. This looks very distributive, right? Or like a distribution range. And as you can see here on an hourly time frame, when Trump was inaugurated, we hit $109,000. That was just above the range or recent highs right here, only to break right back down on some major volatility. This leads me to believe that we are done rallying for a little while, and it's very much likely possible and potential that we actually go lower, down to at least $73,000, if not even about $66,000. When I pull up that VRVP, and by the way, this is going to harm the rest of the market tremendously. Okay, when I pull up that VRVP, you can see that a ton of volume and support has been traded between $67,000 and $63,000. So I would argue that anything in this range is probably going to be a really good buy in a trending market, even into a potential bear market. Now, in a bear market, we'll get a bounce here, we'll rally a little and actually dump further, because bear markets, we see Bitcoin dump at least 60 to 70% now. And off of the major high, we're currently only down about 21%, and at the major low, we were only down about 28%. Anyways, what I'm trying to say by looking at this chart is it looks like we're in for some further downside. It looks like distribution. And so when you look at XRP, which is actually performing more relatively strong to Bitcoin, we are still now in an intermediate term downtrend where we got slammed down really hard here. You would have thought it was right here, but this volatility created a new pattern. So relatively speaking, if Bitcoin dumps, XRP is extremely likely to dump, and there's no way around it. And I do not want to sugarcoat it. Our major support range is going to be $2 down to $1.95. $2.75. However, what I'm really seeing is a crazy amount of support at the $2.40 range. And by the way, with Bitcoin looking as weak as it does and XRP's price action today, this leads me to believe that we're likely going to break below this range, especially because when you paint this picture like we did with Bitcoin, and let's go ahead and grab this line tool. By the way, I got to actually fix this real quick. There we are. Grab the line tool and drag it through. You can see that we're already experiencing that breakdown. So it leads me to believe we're going to break back down to this range here. And by the way, the next time that we touch it, it's probably not going to be so pretty. Again, it's looking very similar to Bitcoin. We have 1 touch, 2 touch, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and by the way, on the 9th touch, right, that's so many breakdowns to that range here. This would be what I would call a textbook head and shoulders pattern. Even though technically this was the bottom of the shoulder, it's now official, right? We have one shoulder here, one head here, another shoulder right here. A breakdown right here would take us back down to at least that $1.47 range, and then we'll see what happens there, right? I can't predict the future that far in advance, but I do know the more likely that we touch this, the more likely it is that we break down to the $1.50 range. And by the way, we have a lot of room to dump on XRP, at least down to that $1.50 range, right? Back to our previous range support, range high. But generally speaking, we are seeing a bit of support here, even with this light breakdown based on the VRVP or volume profile, which basically means a stupid amount of money and interest is right here between the range of 260 down to 230. Any break below 230 though is going to be very dangerous because our last range of support before we touch back down is likely right here at that $2.25 range. And at the 225, if we touch this range, highly likely based on this one candlestick that we're coming back down into the $2 range. So I would say it's likely slightly over for XRP, at least for a little while. That doesn't mean long term. It simply means that if you're looking to accumulate at better ranges and you're already tremendously in profit and you're thinking long term, 2 to 5 to 10 years out, then the $1.57 range or the $1.50 range is going to be a good time to accumulate and buy and add to that position, and definitely at the $1.10 range. But generally speaking here, this is not looking good if you're already buying and accumulating way up here and now you're going to be tremendously in a loss. Sometimes you really have to think about your position, your portfolio, and it's just dependent on each and every single player on whether or not you should be holding this type of a loss. But let's say you started accumulating on that Trump news, and let's say your average cost or basis was about 275 to 272. If it dumps down to 148, you're down 46%. And by the way, in order to gain back another 46 to 50%, you need about a 100% gain, right? Or 86 on the 46. But if it's a 50% gain, dump, you need 100% of your money back. And by the way, making 100% in any market is not easy by any means. Obviously, a lot of people got lucky and played it patient and kind of knew that XRP was a decent asset. But now it's going to be a lot more difficult. This has arguably been one of the most difficult markets I've ever seen in crypto, and I really stand by that, being now involved with almost 3 if not 4 cycles since 2016. So that said, this is not looking too hot. I would play it smart, I'd play it wise, I'd be cautious, I wouldn't be using leverage, and I would just be watching to see what happens at the $2.25 range. Now, with all of that said, if you liked the video and you learned something new, be sure to subscribe. And if you want more in-depth analysis on live calls where you can actually get your questions answered, then head on over to bullrunners.com to check out Altcoin Pro University, because every Tuesday now I run a call, and that call is only for university members where I really dive into the technicals on this stuff and explain what's going to happen, or at least what I think is going to happen. So thanks so much for watching the video, and I will see you in the next video, my friend. Goodbye.